Hi, I'm Michael Mensch and welcome to another video tutorial in my series Shake is Money, how Final Cut Pro editors can make money with Shake now while still reading the manual and trying to figure out what Shake is really about. You know, there's a few simple things that I found Shake does a little bit better than Final Cut Pro, and one of those is time controls, be it time remapping or what I'll show here today, slow motion or speed control. I want to show you this in Final Cut Pro first before we get into Shake. And you know, when any program is trying to create slow motion for a given frame rate, it must do a variation of one of two things. It must either duplicate frames across time or interpolate these frames to create new frames to fill the space of that newly created time. And the key to a successful slow motion is how well the application or the plugin does this interpolation. So here's a sample of what I mean. Let me jump to the beginning of this clip. I took some footage. It's 24p. Progressive footage is notoriously bad for creating slow motion just because there isn't the extra added fields to combine to create those interpolated frames. I took some footage and slowed it down to 50% speed, or made it twice as long. And this way every other frame should be an interpolated frame. So here's an example. Shake's adaptive speed control best at half frame. This is the original frame, and there's the interpolated frame. Here's Final Cut Pro's original frame, interpolated. Shake, interpolated. Final Cut Pro, interpolated. Now what I want you to look at primarily is the background information, the stop sign, the cars. Take a look at the way these programs have handled that interpolation. Here's Shake, it's original, interpolated. Look at the stop sign. Final Cut Pro is original and interpolated. You can see that the quality of that interpolation is much better in Shake than it is in Final Cut Pro. So let's go ahead and with a few easy steps get this done in Shake. Alright, I've gone ahead and loaded a couple of frames of footage here, and I'll drop it into the timeline, either insert or overwrite F9 or F10. And I'm going to show you one way, and then I'll quickly jump back and show you a better way to do this. Now if I insert this clip into or send it to Shake, it's going to come up with a clip that is going to be that long. Of course the clip that I want is this entire length slowed down to 50%, so it's going to need to be twice as long. So if we look at the number of frames is 5 seconds and 19 frames, so that's going to let's see, 12 plus 7, so 7 and 7 is 14, so 11:14. So I want to change this to 11 seconds and 14 frames. So let's just go ahead and grind that down to 11:14. Now that's going to be twice as long, so when I send it to Shake, it's going to give me those first 5:19 twice as long. So let's go ahead. But again, I've got an easier way to do this, but let me at least do it this way first. Okay, right click, send to Shake. Comes up, we'll keep that the same. We'll load our Shake into a place where we can find it later. Right now my documents folder, and we'll choose a place for a placeholder on an external volume and go ahead and say launch Shake and bring up Shake. Now a couple of things in Shake that we need to just touch base on real quick as it's coming up here is, alright, here we go. Remember, in the node view we have our footage, which we'll double click to load in the parameters and into the viewer. We have our switcher node and our multi-layer node, as well as our file out node. When we've double clicked that node, the file in node, it loaded it both into here. We'll check the globals to make sure that the frames are 278. That's twice as many as I need. I really need 139. And then we'll click down here on home to set our timeline to make sure that all 278 frames show up in our timeline. Another thing to try to avoid is we do not want to hit the auto button when we bring stuff in from Shake or from Final Cut Pro, and I'll explain why in a second. The time range is frames 1 to 278, but that's not really frame 1 because Shake is bringing in the entire media clip, and clipping on Parameters 1 tab brings up our source and timing information. We're going to click on the timing tab and notice here that the time shift is actually showing where true frame 1 is, and that's actually 5,663 frames prior to what I want to call frame 1. That's going to be important information here in a few seconds. So let's make some room here and see what we actually have. Another really good thing about Shake is any node that you click on, or even file ins or file outs, you have help information. If you click on that, immediately comes up a bunch of help geared specifically for that node or that thing that you happen to be dealing with. So there's a lot of information in there that I'm going to let you read, like this stuff here. I'm not going to go over that right now. Pull down removals and stuff like that, conversions of frame rates to film, remapping I'm not going to touch on here, but I will say that if you're going to remap, your best bet is to export a self-contained movie file to bring into Shake to remap. It gets a little confusing when you're trying to do it straight out of Final Cut Pro. And then speed. So let's talk about speed. Click on that. And then it gives us a couple of options. You don't want to touch this just yet, but the mode at which it's going to be creating the slow motion or fast motion is either, we have three options: blend, nearest, or adaptive. Blend is going to blend the entire sequence, regular frames and interpolated frames together and try to create a nice smooth effect. That's not really what I want to do here. Nearest is going to, if it's 50%, it's going to take a frame and duplicate it. So you would have frame A, and then the next frame would be B, B, and then C, C. And again, that's not what I want. I do not want duplicated frames. I want interpolated frames. Adaptive is what I want. It's going to create an original frame and then interpolate between original frames. So adaptive. Now that gives us a couple of extra options. Fast motion, or best, is the ability for Shake to analyze the interpolations and make a little bit better determination of the motion. Fast is generally pretty good. In this case I want to go best. It's going to slow down my render, but that's okay. Deinterlacing I'm not worried about because I'm not deinterlacing. Always interpolate, okay, fine. Again, backwards flow, it's a little bit lengthier renders, but you can read about it in the help section. Flow smoothness. If I click this on 0, this is best for anything that I am trying to create slow motion for that is moving. Animals, humans, that has motion already in it. I want the flow smoothness to be nice or as close to 0 as I can get it, and that will help with the process there. If I'm doing, say, a pan of a city skyline and everything is static except for the camera motion, and I want to slow that down, then I'll bring this up to 100. Since this has both static images as well as motion images, we're going to move it right to the middle at 50. Flow precision, read about it in the help. For now I'm going to leave it at 0. Alright, now we still haven't set the speed, so let's go ahead and do that. I want to change 1 or 100% to 0.5 or 50% speed or half speed. Go ahead and tab out of that, and you'll notice that my out point has changed, as well as, looking over here in the viewer, my in point has changed. Why? Well, what I've done now is told Shake that the time source original frame 1 is 5,663 frames prior to my original in point of 1. But Shake has brought in the entire media clip and slowed the entire media clip to 50%. So I have to double this number or divide by my speed. So let's pull up our calculator widget, and as soon as this comes up, I want to put in 5663 divided by 0.5, and that will multiply it. Well, divided by 0.5 is multiplying, blah, blah, blah. And I get a number 11,326. So I'm going to drop this number in here, minus 11,326. Now again, what this is telling Shake is my original frame 1 off of the media clip is minus 11,362 frames away from the original frame 1, which is now 5,662 frames away. I hope that makes sense. It certainly does to me. But there's going to be an easier way to do this, and I'll show that later at the end. Okay, so now I have all 278 frames that will take me to the end of that one clip that I wanted and disregard all of the extra stuff when I expanded the shape in, or the length of the clip in Final Cut Pro. So let's go ahead and render that out. render file out node, 278 frames, high quality render, and I'll bring that into Final Cut Pro and we'll show that to you later. But before I do that, let's just assume that I've rendered that, and while it's rendering I'm going to go and do some other stuff. So just real quick, let's do this. Let's quit out of here. No, we don't want to save. Let's delete all this. All right, here we are back in Final Cut Pro. I want to insert my footage. Now, instead of increasing this by double the frames to do the interpolation correctly, let's go ahead and rough out the speed. Now, this is a great way to do this here. I want speed now at 50%. You could choose anything, 63%, 72%, whatever. Just remember that when you go into Shake, you want to change that percentage to the exact number that you're going to be putting into Shake. Alright, so 50%, let's say okay. That's going to automatically double, plus it's going to keep those same frames. Now let's send this to Shake. Again, we'll keep these the same. It's going to ask, oops, let's go back here. There, save, yes, replace. There, send that to Alex. Yes, replace. Okay, launch Shake, great. And here we come. Some of you might find this easier, but I think the math is more confusing as to why you have to do things a certain way. So let's go ahead and double click this, load it back in here, hit our timing tab, get this up out of the way so we can see. Now look, the time shift is automatically set to the 11,326. The retime is not. So let's go ahead and hit speed, change this to adaptive, and also notice too that our first frame is nowhere close to our first frame that we want to bring back into Final Cut Pro. Change it to adaptive, change it to best, change this to 0.5 now, and now we have that clip. Again, it's easier, it makes more sense, but if you don't understand what this number is and you run into errors, you're going to have some problems. So let's go ahead and render this, get back into Final Cut Pro, and see how we reconnect it. Okay, so here we are back in Final Cut Pro, and you'll notice that Shake has brought back in the clip here, and let's go ahead and turn it on, and we'll see what we've got. Well, let's turn it off and see what Final Cut Pro gave us. Okay, not too bad. And let's turn on Shake and see what Shake gave us. Just enough smoother that you can tell the difference, and I think it's a little bit more effective. And it's this very simple plan. I mean, it's a very simple technique to send it into Shake, do your slow-mo there, and bring it back into Final Cut Pro. I hope this tip has been helpful. Oh, one more thing, just a reminder, I didn't really show it on the tutorial. Just double check your preferences in the file out node to make sure that it is going to QuickTime, and you know, I shoot progressive a lot, so I like to it defaults to a interlaced, and I like to change it back to progressive. So just double check those on your way out the door, and you'll be in good shape. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and good luck with Shake.